gave them to somebody. Okay,
Yes.
sentencing sheet's right there?
It is.
Yep. Right. Sit right here.
All right.
Thank you. You can be seated.
Your Honor, if it please the court,
Yes, sir.
the matter before you here today is docket number 2022 GS 2200741, the State of South Carolina versus Raymond Douglas Moody, indictment for murder. 2022 GS 2200742, State versus Raymond Douglas Moody, indictment for kidnapping. And 2022 GS 22743, State versus Raymond Douglas Moody, criminal sexual conduct, first degree. Your Honor, all three of these charges have been true-billed by the Georgetown County grand jury, dated August 17th, 2022. There is another indictment, 2022 GS 22740, State versus Raymond Douglas Moody, indictment for obstruction of justice. That has also been true-billed, Your Honor. However, the State would be dismissing the obstruction of justice charge.
Okay.
With regard to the kidnapping, murder, and criminal sexual conduct in the first degree charges, it's the State's understanding that Mr. Moody wishes to plead guilty to these charges. He is represented by two fine counsel, Mr. Scott Bellamy and Ms. Natasha Hanna. I will give the court a brief series of the facts, basically off of the indictment, charging indictment, and for the qualification of the plea. Your Honor, on the CSC criminal sexual conduct first degree, that is that Raymond Douglas Moody did in Georgetown on or about April 25th, 2009, engage in sexual battery with Brittanee Drexel, while the victim was also the victim of forcible confinement, kidnapping, robbery, extortion, burglary, housebreaking, or any other similar offense. Your Honor, on the kidnapping, it is that Raymond Moody did in Georgetown County on or about April 25th, 2009, unlawfully seize, confine, inveigle, decoy, kidnap, abduct, or carry away Brittanee Drexel without authority of law. And finally, Your Honor, that Raymond Moody did in Georgetown County on or about April 25th, 2009, willfully, feloniously, and intentionally killed the victim, Brittanee Drexel, with malice aforethought, either expressed or implied, by means of manual strangulation, and the victim did die as a proximate result of that strangulation in Georgetown County. Your Honor, after you talk with Mr. Moody, we would ask that you would turn back to us, and we will go into a little bit more detail on the facts, if necessary. And then, Your Honor, we are prepared to give some victim impact. And then, of course, Mr. Moody, by and through his attorneys, would have the last word if that is suitable to the court. But, Your Honor, he is pleading to murder, kidnapping, and rape, CSC first, and the State is recommending life in prison without possibility of parole.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Bellamy, do you and Ms. Hanna represent Mr. Moody?
Yes, sir, Your Honor, I do. We do.
Have you all explained the natures of the charges against him, the possible punishment he could receive, as well as his constitutional rights?
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
And does he understand those?
I believe he does. We've had numerous opportunities to meet with him at the jail, meet with him prior to his arrest, I believe he does, Your Honor.
Okay. And how does he want to plead to these charges?
Guilty, Your Honor.
And based on the evidence that the state has against him, as well as your conversations with him, do you concur with his plea?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Moody, you want to plead guilty?
Yes, sir.
Have you had enough time to talk to your attorneys about this decision?
Yes, sir.
Are you satisfied with their representation?
I am.
Have you gone over the discovery with them that the state has provided them concerning these charges?
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions at all about that?
No, sir.
Have you had enough time to meet with them and discuss your case with them, as well as any possible defenses you may have?
Yes, sir, I have.
Do you have any complaints against them whatsoever?
None whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay. Today, are you under the influence of any alcohol or drugs?
No, sir.
Do you have any mental diseases that would prevent you from understanding what you're doing here today?
No, sir.
How far did you go in school?
A GED.
Okay. And if I ask you anything that you don't understand, if you would simply tell me that, I'll explain further. You understand that?
Yes, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
Do you have any concerns with the grand jury that indicted you on these cases?
No, sir.
Okay. By pleading, you're giving up certain constitutional rights. You have a constitutional right under the Fifth Amendment to remain silent. But when you plead guilty, you give that constitutional right up because you're telling me you're guilty, you understand?
Yes, sir.
You also have a constitutional right to a jury trial on these charges. And in that trial, the state would have the burden of proving you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt to all 12 jurors. You'd be able to sit in this courtroom and confront each witness that would testify against you from that witness stand. Your lawyers could cross-examine each one of the state's witnesses. They could subpoena witnesses to testify in your behalf. They could put up any defenses you may have to these crimes. You plead guilty, you give all that up. You understand?
Yes, sir, I do.
And you've given up any appeals that could come from that trial. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
If you want to appeal this guilty plea today, you and your lawyers must file that appeal with the clerk of court within 10 days of today's date, or you give that up as well. You understand?
Yes, sir.
You got any questions you want to ask me?
No, sir.
You understand for criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, it carries up to 30 years in prison.
Yes, sir.
And for kidnapping, it also carries up to 30 years in prison. It is a violent and most serious offense. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
As well as criminal sexual conduct. And murder carries from 30 to life in prison. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have any questions concerning these charges and the possible punishments they carry?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm going to listen to the solicitor now, and I'll get back with you.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'm going to take you back in time, back around April 22nd to 23rd of 2009. I met a young individual named Brittanee Drexel. She's 17 years of age, from Rochester, New York. Decides that she wants to come to Myrtle Beach around the spring break time, around in April, with a group of friends of hers from Rochester. She came and arrived and had a good time for the most part up until April 25th of 2019, which is the day in question and the date the crimes alleged in the indictment occurred. We know this from a variety of different sources. In other words, law enforcement spent a significant amount of time investigating the events immediately surrounding them and were able to generate some video relating to Ms. Drexel's whereabouts. If you see on the screen, Your Honor, I believe it should come up on the court screen. The court monitors, the clerk has it. Investigators were able to determine that around at 8:15 p.m. you'll see Ms. Drexel, actually she's in the middle of the screen right now, walking left to right. She's right above the 04 right there.
Okay.
They were able to determine her whereabouts at that time through phone records and text messages. Investigators were able to determine that at the time Ms. Drexel is walking, she's actually walking southbound from the Bar Harbor where she was staying with her friends towards the 20th Avenue South, which is the Blue Water Hotel. She had met other friends from Rochester at that time, was going down to pick up clothing items and to turn around and come back. We know this also because, fortunately, like many teenagers in this day and age, she loves to use her cell phone and she loved to text message. And so a lot of the text messages, we were able to determine what was in Ms. Drexel's mind during that period of time. And specifically, we know that there were pretty benign conversations. She was walking down there to meet individuals for friends to pick up flip-flops. And we also know that there was a little bit of a concern over the clothes that she was wearing. Young teenage girls deciding what they're going to wear that night. She was wearing a pair of shorts, and so as a result of that, she had to cut that trip to the Blue Water Short to come back. We know that because of text messages, and we know the timeline we're dealing with. And specifically, if you noticed on video, it was about 8:15 p.m. on April 25th of 2019. And then we also know that there was a discussion about wearing a pair of black shorts that another friend of hers was going to wear that night, and that she needed to get back to the Bar Harbor to take those shorts back so her friend could wear them. A little bit of a scuffle between friends, and she acknowledges she has to do that. So she gets, there's the next video that we have that we can put a timeline in place for her, is on 8/18. We see Brittanee wearing the black shorts that her friend wants to wear going into the Bar Harbor. We also her wearing a blue and teal shirt. While she's up there returning for just less than 7 minutes, another text message comes in saying, "I want to wear the shirt too, come back." So Brittanee realizes that she has to walk all the way back from the Bar Harbor from the Blue Water to the Bar Harbor, which is about 25 blocks, to give the clothing items back to her friends. We know when she leaves the Blue Water because at 8:48 p.m. we get to see Ms. Drexel leave the Blue Water, and we know that she's perfectly fine at that time, and that's the last time that we get to lay eyes on Brittanee Drexel. The 11th Avenue video that I showed you before, Your Honor, investigators back in 2009 did not see any video of her returning back to the Bar Harbor. We know that she texted during that walk up there, but we're unable to determine exactly where she was at that time in 2009. And then ultimately, around 8:58 p.m., her last text message acknowledges that she's on the way back to the hotel and that she's going to stay in for the night because she's going back to Rochester the next day. That's the last electronic communication we know of that Brittanee Drexel sent to anybody. Her phone records corroborate that information. Family and friends, within 7 to 15 minutes right away, realized because she used her phone so much that she wasn't communicating. They immediately became concerned and worried about her. And the text messages continue and continue. "Brittanee, where are you? Are you okay? Are you okay?" She never responds. Through the timeline set up by phone records that law enforcement was able to accumulate during that period of time, 8:10, 8:15, it continues on. "Where are you? I'm really getting concerned." Finally, Dawn becomes aware of it, Dawn Drexel being Brittanee's mom, and she tries to chime in to find out where it is. Clearly something, as time goes on, something's wrong. We do know the phone data location from the tower location back in the technology we had in 2009 indicates the tower that her phone is moving southbound to some degree and ultimately resides what we call Tower 66, which is not the location of the phone. It's a location of a tower in Charleston County that's projecting up into Georgetown County, and the phone ultimately comes stationary around the Pole Yard Landing, North Santee River area. Ultimately, that phone continues to operate until that's last, for whatever reason, at 11:58 p.m. is the last ping contact that we have with that phone. After that, all that source of information is exhausted as in relation to her phone. Obviously, the heightened concern and the public awareness generated a lot of interest. Dawn, Chad, Drexel, the Drexel family was very concerned about it. They came to Myrtle Beach to increase public awareness of this, and they were on local media stations and things asking for tips, anything to try to find out where Brittanee is in the hopes that she could be returned safely at home to understand what happened. Based on that, and the law enforcement had already secured search warrants for telephone records, had worked on tips, had worked on searches. Many, many volunteer organizations were combing the woods in the area around the Pole Yard Landing during that period of time. All of our local law enforcement agencies, the Sheriff's Department, Myrtle Beach Police Department, FBI, were working and searching in hopes that we could turn them. As the months went by, it became more and more concerning that there were no concrete leads to determine where exactly she went. We knew about the phone, but we really didn't have anything else. So the investigation turned to known associates, video, anything that we could do to try to find out what happened. As that continued on, actually, the years go by, and there's an inability to really get movement in the case, a lot of suspicion, and a lot of dead ends. Ultimately, a major break in the case retrospectively comes in around January of 2011, and one of the media outreaches and the public outreach occurs that actually a family member of Mr. Moody had contacted a friend of his, and then contacted law enforcement and said, you may want to look at a fellow named Raymond Moody who's living in the area in Georgetown. He had some significant run-ins and spent significant amount of time in California prior to this, and that may sound like something he might be capable of doing. That's the first time Mr. Moody's name's on the radar for law enforcement. A follow-up investigations occur during that period of time, and at that point in time, they interview an individual named Angel Voss, who was a girlfriend also with Mr. Moody during that period of time. I believe Ms. Voss, and this is Mike Hull from the Myrtle Beach Police Department, as well as Phil Hanna, who was part of a task force for the Georgetown County Sheriff's Department. Not seen in there is Ken McKenzie, who was a SLED agent working on this case as well. At that time, Ms. Voss came forward and expressed significant concerns about the possibility that Mr. Moody could have had something to do with this, but was unable to provide any concrete information. That focused the investigation on Mr. Moody for a period of time. It resulted in a search warrant executed in the Sunset Lodge where Mr. Moody lived at that time. There was nothing of evidentiary value discovered from that search, and honestly, the direction of the investigation is it meant in this direction kind of came to a standstill. There wasn't sufficient evidence to move forward with a criminal charge. There wasn't sufficient evidence to disprove this case theory, and then the tips continue to roll in. All right. The good news about it is there was such media awareness about it that resulted in why we're all here today. The bad news is there was such media awareness of it that everybody that had a keyboard wanted to claim that they killed Brittanee Drexel. It was a challenging time for law enforcement during the period of time. Some of them you can immediately discard the claim because you can see that does not comport with the facts law enforcement knew at that time. Some are exotically sickening and detailed about what this person claims they did, and law enforcement had to spend a significant amount of time disproving what I would just call these crackpot, really breathtaking claims that they had something to do with this. So law enforcement's stuck in a quandary. They want to filter legitimate information away from illegitimate information, and it is a time-consuming process. Fortunately or unfortunately, there was just enough details about the case that had been washed through some media accounts and things like that evildoers were able to seize on a few points to seem credible, but it took a lot of effort to realize they were not credible later on, and that was a time-consuming process. To fast forward just a touch, almost never in a cold case does the passage of time make a case better. It's very rare that that happens, except in one exception, and that is when advancements in technology help aid the investigative process. As we're going through this, it's easy to forget we have the ubiquitous cell phone and the smartphone in our pocket, but the iPhone didn't exist until 2007. And the concept of using cell phone technology to help flesh out criminal investigations was a novel idea. I think we all ubiquitously understand now GPS tracking and all this stuff. We all feel like we have these tracking devices in our pocket to some degree. If we go back to 2009 and the technology that existed, it's not GPS tracking. As a matter of fact, what becomes the technology that helps open this thing up is the use of cell data, user data, not Google accounts and all the stuff that we think ubiquitous nowadays, but actually using a tower location and the communication between a tower location, not to use it for the service of cellular service, but to actually use it to try to determine a user's location in relation to that fixed tower location. That was a novel concept back in 2009, excuse me. And the investigators didn't have that tool. As we fast forward through 2014, ultimately through the investigations that resulted in digs and accusations down in McClellanville and in Berkeley County and Charleston that were all generated by anonymous tipsters or sometimes inmates giving credible sounding tips that ultimately ended up panning out absolutely the wrong way. Why that happened, the FBI's CAS system, which is their cellular analysis survey team, were developing their expertise as time went on. Back in 2009, the CAS team was basically two investigators doing the best that they could. By 2019 into 2020, they're a pretty robust organization that are very good at what they do. So when the investigations and these leads started to kind of go south, which appeared to be very credible at the time, which was into Berkeley County, into Charleston County, the FBI, who had been working cooperatively at that time with Myrtle Beach Police Department, with the Sheriff's Office, Berkeley County Sheriff's Office, State Law Enforcement Division, North Carolina authorities, some allegations went into Wilmington. They decided the best approach would be to take all of the information from the other agencies and get back to basics. Look basically at what we have back, these videos that we showed in court, spend some time with them, spend time with what records that we do have, and apply new technology to an old problem. So what was evidence that the law enforcement had the entire time, they just didn't have any means to exploit it the way that the CAS units are able to exploit it today. And so when I say exploitation, it is to use the engineering information from the cell tower dumps to begin to show how far away a phone was from the time that the call was made. And so suddenly, these videos of walking down the boulevard can be forensic points to determine who was where at what time. So we see the product that came from the CAS system. And this is, what they do is not for public consumption. It's an investigative technique that is not supposed to be used on how they do this. In essence, this is a very, very watered down of the product that the FBI was able to generate around 2019 into 2020. And specifically, those little pie-shaped arrays are fixed cell tower locations. And with the phone records they were able to get, the Myrtle Beach Police got, other agencies got back in 2009, they were able to overlay this in conjunction with the timing of the text messages with the videos that we have, which are very, very limited at that time. People didn't have ring videos back then. They were able to determine Brittanee Drexel's phone at certain positions on that map based on her walking speed. And it wasn't just technology. It was an effort to literally put boots on the ground with stopwatches and walking the route and seeing what time at certain places were. And those are the efforts that Myrtle Beach, the FBI, Georgetown County through their TFOs put in to try to solve this. Once they did that, they were able to determine first that Brittanee Drexel's phone at 9:06 roughly, that by the time that her phone is in that arc at that tower location right there, it was no longer at walking speed. It actually was moving at a speed that could only be attained by being in a vehicle. So between walking speed and driving, something had to happen in a very narrow window that was probative to solving the crime. Just to continue this point, its phone records through the constant text usages sends information to a tower, which comes back down, which builds a framework that the CAS unit was able to exploit. So we see now that her telephone is now in 9:15, so from 7 minutes she makes it to the next arc, which is up towards Highway 17 Business. Now they're heading south, and they can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. Now if you go to the next slide, please. That phone is moving 55, 65 miles an hour southbound, heading down towards the pole yard, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's relating to the timing of that. You'll see it's 9:30 p.m. Next slide, please. This is advances you see, and this is, once again, each text message and each time it's reached out, there's a data point on that map. This is an abbreviated version for court purposes today. That phone was 9:46 p.m. You see around that area, Waverly Road, the tower off Waverly Road. If you're familiar with that area, you know where that tower is, you see it. Her phone's in that arc to the south side on the boulevard, on Highway 17. Next slide, please. By that time, by 10:01 p.m., her phone, beyond any reasonable doubt, is made it to Georgetown. Now, we don't know where she is, but we make a circumstantial assumption that she is with her phone. Ultimately, we continue the last data point, 2 more data points that we're showing. Next slide, please. At 10:15 p.m., now she is, the tower location is up north of Brittanee, going southbound. That's on the other side of Georgetown, I apologize. And then we're approaching with the North Santee River, the pole yard area. Ultimately, the CAS system would be able to testify that the final location for that phone, where that location dies, is in a electronic arc that puts it in the pole yard location past 11:58 p.m., the time that the signals leave that telephone. Based on that information, the major break is they were able to pinpoint points on the one video that they had, which is 11th Avenue South, a southbound facing camera that they had seen 1,000 times, but the videos and the cars that they see on it are really meaningless. Now, with a specific data point, right, they were able to realize that because Ms. Drexel didn't make it to the corner of that video, but she was in the other video, and she was on the phone at this point, but not on the phone at this point, they were able to pick a very narrow, less than a minute time frame that something happened to her. And the only car that passes during the period of time is the vehicle that will stop right there. That vehicle right there. We would prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Brittanee Drexel is in that vehicle at that time, at this time. Driving that vehicle is Raymond Moody. We are able to link, once we have a vehicle at the right time, we're able to link the actual video. That's a picture of the actual video, or the actual photograph of the car. We'll see it's a 1998 Ford Explorer, gray trim on the rims, running boards, and an object dangling from the rearview mirror. We're able to link that vehicle to Raymond Moody, as well as Angel Vaz, as both having access to that vehicle at the time. Based on those evidentiary developments, the investigation, and this is in 2009 and 2020, once again refocuses on Mr. Moody, Ms. Vaz, and the situations concerning Georgetown County. The FBI focuses heavily on that. And part of that process is going back in time to 2009 and looking at any interviews. And they unearthed the interview that we had showed earlier with Angel Vaz back in 2011, where in that interview she talks about being afraid of Mr. Moody, that Mr. Moody has abused her repeatedly, that she's concerned when he leaves the house. She is aware of what happened in California. It's a very striking venue, and she agrees to cooperate. The next day, she actually takes law enforcement around to areas in Myrtle Beach and the hotels they may have been staying at the time, provides credit card receipts to try to account for their whereabouts. As you recall, that investigation kind of lost steam when there was no more proof after the search warrants at the Sunset Lodge, and it was still pending, but there was lack of momentum based on that. On April 27th of 2022, Ms. Vaz was reinitiated. Now, prior to this interview, when the FBI was specifically looking at old information, they had unearthed a confidential source that back in 2014, a confidential source had come forward to law enforcement and said that an intoxicated Angel Vaz had made shocking admissions to them, specifically claiming that she was concerned about Raymond constantly being accused of things that he didn't do. As a matter of fact, she knows he didn't do it because she killed her and Raymond helped hide the body. Based on this information, and that statement had been debunked by corroborating, there were serious material corroboration problems with that statement. Some was partially true, very much was untrue. The intoxicated state made law enforcement very skeptical about the veracity of that statement. But nonetheless, it's a data point that existed. Now that we have a car, we have those statements. Angel's reinitiated, her being the target of this process now because of the inculpatory statements. Through that, and we see the FBI interviewing her as a still photo back in 2027, that's the turning point in the investigation where Angel Vaz comes to realize that she offered to cooperate before, but she continues her offer to cooperate, and at the tail end of that agrees to wear a wire and have discussions with Mr. Moody. Following up on the 27th interview, FBI agents along with Georgetown County Sheriff's Department, Myrtle Beach Police, they get a search warrant, execute a search warrant on Mr. Moody's residence. Nothing of evidentiary value was particularly found in the search warrant, but what did happen is there was a face-to-face conversation with Mr. Moody and FBI agents concerning the direction of the investigation and the effort of building a case towards Ms. Vaz and by association, Mr. Moody. Law enforcement had always been skeptical about that, but nonetheless, that's the evidence we had at the time. Based on that, Mr. Moody had retained an attorney and agreed to come in to have a sit-down discussion with law enforcement officers concerning his involvement in that. He did that, in fact, and I think one of the more compelling statements that Mr. Moody had made during that is that he acknowledged that he had spent a significant amount of time in California. He acknowledged that he had committed those acts, that he took responsibility for what he did, and it wasn't fair for somebody else to be accused of something they didn't do. I'll accept responsibility for what I did. Based on that interview, which occurred roughly May 5th of 2022, Mr. Moody had given inculpatory statements, and then in this statement, with law enforcement officers, you see Mr. Bellamy, who was representing Mr. Moody. He agreed. Hank Harrison from the Georgetown County Sheriff's Office. He came clean in that interview, basically. Law enforcement is very, very skeptical, and I'll say this to everyone, they need to understand. Unfortunately, we may never know exactly what happened that day because Ms. Drexel can't tell us what happened. And she would be extraordinarily reliable about relaying the events that happened to her. And much of the forensic detail of exactly what happened has been lost to the ages by now, no matter how much law enforcement's worked to find it. So to some degree, we are compelled to listen to the version as provided by Mr. Moody, and then it's incumbent upon law enforcement to determine the credibility or not on certain points and not certain points. So when I recall to the court what Mr. Moody's positions were, we expect in law enforcement to be self-serving statements. We accept them, but then we have to corroborate and see if we can prove them or disprove them. And so in this situation, we were looking for corroboration, points that Mr. Moody said to support his position or challenge it. And in this situation, Mr. Moody acknowledged that he was driving the Ford Explorer back in April 25th of 2009, that Ms. Voss was in the vehicle with him, and they had come there to party like they usually did from time to time, leaving Georgetown to come to Myrtle Beach, that they saw Ms. Drexel walking down the street by themselves. He saw her and approached her and asked if she wanted to party, in other words, use marijuana with them. According to Mr. Moody's version of the events, Ms. Drexel voluntarily got in the vehicle at that time for the purposes of partying, and we don't have any evidence to contradict that or not. Ms. Drexel can't tell us how she got in that vehicle at that point in time. Mr. Moody says he did not form any intent to hurt her or do anything in that period of time in Horry County, that we were able to corroborate that Mr. Moody had a campsite in the Pole Yard Landing area, that he would go down there and camp and fish from time to time, spend the night down there, and that was their destination as they drove southbound with Ms. Voss in the vehicle with Ms. Drexel for the purpose of smoking marijuana. Mr. Moody did say that he had hoped that during the course of the use of marijuana that maybe some voluntary sexual activity may occur, but at that time claimed it was consensual, hoping the marijuana would play a role in that decision-making process. Once they arrived there was no contention in the Pole Yard, that area. His campsite is not where the dot is. It's actually a little bit more into the woods. There's not a dot on that spot, but it's in the wooded section further down. At some point in time, Ms. Voss had to go tend to an errand concerning keys to a family member, and she left during that period of time. When she left, everything was fine between the two of them. They were partying, socializing according to the sworn post-Miranda statements that we were able to corroborate some details of that story based on phone calls between Ms. Voss and Mr. Moody, and specifically phone calls occurred between the two of them that time, indicating that they were not together at that period of time, that the phone calls, common sense dictates if you're calling someone, you're not usually standing beside them. Nonetheless, Mr. Moody indicates that after that consensual interaction was taking place, he decided that it was time to advance the situation, wanted sexual conduct, wanted to have sex with her. She resisted at that point in time. At that point in time, he seized her, and the kidnapping in Georgetown County began occurring at that point in time. Mr. Moody recalls that he compelled her to remove all of her clothing and then sexually assaulted her through force or threats of violence at that point in time. Once the act was completed, he realized that he was most likely going back to prison for his conduct and manually strangled her at the campsite at that point. He relays to us that at that point in time, when she is deceased, he put her in a blanket and then moved her some bushes outside the area. Ms. Voss returned. Upon returning from her errand, which once she returned, she immediately asked where Ms. Drexel was, and his issue was that her friends had come picked her up. Through Ms. Voss's cooperation, she continues to maintain her high skepticism if that was the true story, but did not see anything specifically herself, but highly skeptical about that being the correct version of the events. They left the scene. Mr. Moody indicates during the middle of the night he took a different vehicle when Ms. Voss was asleep, came back, got Ms. Drexel, her mortal remains, and then took her up to a location off Pennyroyal Road, which is near the Georgetown County Airport, into a wooded area, and then buried her. After that interview with law enforcement was completed, he agreed to take investigators both to the pole yard and point out the campsite locations, and he agreed to go to the area off Pennyroyal Road and pointed to investigators the location where he placed Ms. Drexel's mortal remains. That occurred roughly on May of 2008. Based on his initial statements, Mr. Moody was charged with obstruction of justice to take him into custody until we could determine and corroborate some of the details of his statement. Obviously, the statements are shocking, but they've heard plenty of stories before. So we wanted to see what we could find out there. He was being detained on an obstruction of justice charge, which he admitted to doing. And then roughly May 11th to May 12th of 2012, investigators for the Sheriff's Department and the FBI found the mortal remains of Ms. Drexel off that road. Of interest, of important point for corroboration, there were several items that were recovered from or location of her mortal remains, and no clothing or remnants of clothing were recovered to corroborate Mr. Moody's version of what he had done to her. Her mortal remains were proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be hers through dental records as well as DNA testing. Based on that, Mr. Moody was served with kidnapping in Georgetown County, criminal CSC with a CSC and Georgetown County, as well as the murder, the strangulation of Ms. Drexel. As it relates to sentencing, Your Honor, I think you'll notice that the state filed a notice of intent to seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and that's pursuant to the provisions of 1725-45A, which means if he has a prior conviction of a serious offense or a prior conviction of 2 serious offenses, that it's a mandatory life imprisonment without the possibility of parole sentence. That's what we're moving before the court. In support of that, Your Honor, we have Courts Exhibit 1 and 2, and those are specific court documents that we've received from California relating to his 7 convictions back in 2000 that occurred in 2003. The convictions occurred in, 2002. The convictions occurred in 2003. And those are forcible rape with a minor as well as kidnapping. And I'll hand those up to the court.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what he just corrected me. I appreciate that. Those are 1982 offense dates, 1983 convictions dates. I'm talking too fast. I'm not listening to what I'm saying. I apologize. Those are 1982 and 83 convictions.
Okay.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
This is courts 1 and 2. Those are copies of the sentencing sheets to prove those prior convictions. Your Honor, we believe that is the factual basis in support of Mr. Moody's guilty plea. Well, I believe that Your Honor should accept his guilty plea and then sentence him to life imprisonment. Thank you, Your
Okay.
Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Moody, you heard what the solicitors told me. Are those facts correct?
Yes, sir, they are.
And you're in fact guilty of murdering her?
Yes, sir.
And you raped her?
Yes, sir.
And you kidnapped her?
Yes, sir.
Any question at all about that?
No, sir.
And you have prior convictions out of California for
Yes,
rape,
sir. Yes, sir.
which makes this your second or third strike, which can put you in a situation of life. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I find there's a factual basis for your plea. It is freely and voluntarily entered into, that you've had advice of competent counsel whom you tell me is satisfied. I will accept your plea to murder, to criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, and to kidnapping.
Yes, sir.
And I will hear from the solicitor and any potential victims, and then I will give you and your attorney the last opportunity to talk with me prior to sentencing.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I know there was a few dates that were off there, but I think it was just an amazing job by Scott Hickson trying to bring 13 years into a 15, 20, 30-minute timeline. It would just boggle the mind, and I know the defense attorneys have had to look through all of this stuff, but there's just tons and terabytes of data to carve away at and to come back to that timeline. And I do want to focus on Brittanee through victim impact, but I would be messing up if I didn't thank Horry County Sheriff's Office, Horry County Police Department. Myrtle Beach Police Department was there. Chief Proc was helping with the dig, SLED. Georgetown County Sheriff's Office was in it from the beginning. These guys worked together, and especially when one group would sort of move on to many other things, the FBI came back in and did just an incredible job. This is a state's case. One of the things that we talked about, without getting into too much detail, but we have special U.S. attorneys in our office, and we had talked about whether or not to go federal with this case. It was one of the agreements that we made with Mr. Moody to be able to get the body, was that he wanted to go through state court. And that put FBI in kind of a pickle. They're a federal group. They didn't leave. They helped. They did the dig. They were just incredible. So Georgetown County Sheriff's Office, FBI, Myrtle Beach Police, SLED, Horry County Police, and Horry County Sheriff's Office handled these thousands of, and I'm sure I'm leaving out some organizations, I don't mean to. But they kept this alive for today. And, you know, again, this is all about Brittanee. So I want to introduce you, Your Honor, to Brittanee's father, Chad Drexel. Chad, if you'll come on up. All right. So. Good, good, good.
Good morning, Your Honor. Bear with me, this is tough. I'm Chad Drexel, D-R-E-X-E-L, Brittanee's adopted father. When I met Britt, she was just about 3.5 years old. I had just finished my second tour in the Navy. And never expected to meet someone along with a beautiful little girl, caring heart, full of energy. Brittany loved to entertain family and friends. Like most young girls, she loved style, music, and of course, her soccer. When Britt applied herself, it was amazing. There wasn't anything that stopped her or stood in her way. She was focused. And I saw some great, great potential. And I learned so much from a little girl that, I got this. We were just a typical suburban family. I started raising her while I was in the service. As the years went on, Brittany was getting more popular. Lots of friends. And then her sister Marissa was born. And that's when I saw the big change in Marissa and in Brittany. She took that big sister role like it was nothing. She enjoyed speaking her mind, teaching her little sister and the whole family everything she learned at school. She loved dinner time, telling us what she did in school. Not a lot of children do that nowadays. That's the one thing that I didn't still, just how was school? She would tell us how was school and what she did and what she was learning. And that's where I saw her growth. Then Cam and her brother was born. That's when I saw the loving, caring person. And I'm sorry, it's hard to speak. She became a leader, not only among her friends, and she developed that through her family. Just like every teenager, she loved to have the spotlight on her and just have a good time. All right, getting back to the big sister role she took, she became very strong-willed and strong-minded. When I found out that she went missing, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to, I just felt numb. I don't wish that for anybody, not even people in prison, to lose their child. I love them, but I mean, I'm going to be her adopted dad, but I loved her. At first, I thought she would be found because like Don had mentioned that she was going down there and searching, they're gonna bring her home. And that's what I thought would happen. However, days turned to months, and those months turned into years. Years of torture, wondering where my daughter was, our daughter was, our sister was. Every single day I prayed. I was a Catholic, and I became a Christian really quick because at the end of the day, all you got is you and God. Sorry. Life's about choices. One choice caused all this. Everyone affected here. One choice. Sir, one choice. The anxiety, stress, and sadness I felt pushed me into something that I'd never experienced before. I heard of it in the military. PTSD along with depression. I was fine in the beginning because I couldn't eat much, but it affected me so much that it put me, I just didn't want to do nothing. I gained 100 pounds. Just my health is deteriorating because of this. Unfortunately, it wasn't just me, it was affecting, and I can relate. I might have been in the process of a divorce, but I cared for all those that was around Brittanee because they all knew her brother and sister, going through this, trying to keep them away from social media and websites and forums and people calling, knocking at the doors. Again, we're just a normal suburban family. She was just coming down to visit with friends and have a good time and get away from home and the stress of school. I get it. Not that I agreed, but I get it. She's 17. So, now 13 years later, I found out the horrible, disgusting, and senseless way she was abducted and murdered. Every part of my being wants to say and do something about that, but my heart knows that I will not, and Brittanee would not want me to go to jail over that. So I internalize it. That's all I do, just, it's sickening. The defendant took so much more away from us than just Brittanee. Everyone here is affected by that because of the choices you make. I teach him that every day. Everything is a consequence from your choice, good or bad. I'll never be able to walk Brittanee down the aisle, neither will her blood father or Don. She'll never be able to see my granddaughter, her niece, who's here, is amazing. All that's snatched away from us. So, Your Honor, I ask that you keep all this in mind when you sentence. Man, I hate getting upset. I'm so sick of it. The defendant was and is, and I'm sorry, a perverted, sick monster. That this should never happen to anyone ever again. And I don't wish it on them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, Camden is Brittanee's brother, Camden Drexel.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
I'm speaking for everybody today, and I just want to say my perspective on how I was brought up and how I was affected by my sister's disappearance. And I don't wish anything bad on anybody else, and I hope people's daughters are guarded with the right choices and brought up correctly. And growing up, my sister was my second mom. She was, and she really meant the world to me. Going to her soccer games and just being there for her and to be her little brother / baby was a dream. I always would sleep in her room, be guarded by her, and it's just someone you would really want to ask for in your life. But I got that taken away from me, but now learning everything of what has happened has taught me and guided me through my path that I am today. And I'm going to school for film and TV and doing it for my sister. So I want to live for her, and I'm wearing a cross with her today, and I keep it with me every single day. And I just want to say I'm living for her and making the choices that she would, but on my own. And I believe that she's guiding me all the way, and thank God that we found justice and can end this horror story and move on with our lives by keeping her in our thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace.
Your Honor, Brittany's grandma is Carol Wagner. Ms. Carol? Renee?
Just start off by giving him your name and spelling, please.
Hi, my name is Carol Wagner, and W-A-G-N-E-R. I'm speaking on behalf of my granddaughter Brittanee Drexel, and Marissa. Now I want you to understand what Brittanee's death has done to me. And Brittanee's siblings. And who Brittany was to me. Brittany was my older sister. Brittany was my protector and my role model. Everything Brittany did when we were younger as children, from 1 to 11 years old, I followed in her footsteps. She taught me how to become a bright, warm-hearted woman, and how to face the trials and tributes I could possibly face as a young adult in the future, and how to deal with them as I grow. She even told me how to be treated as a woman when I would grow up. I remember her telling me, make sure you date a guy that treats you well, and you deserve the world. Now the day that she was taken against her will and killed by you, Mr. Moody, it affected me tremendously. I have had countless dreams of the what, where, who, when, to piece together her story, and now the truth comes out. This makes me angry that you had to keep such a huge secret to yourself for 13 years. You got to do as you please for 13 years. Was that fair to us? No. Should I have to even experience my sister's death? No, I shouldn't have had, but I did. Should I have to fear my own child now because of this monster like you to get let free? Yes, I should fear stepping out into the outside world with my child, but shouldn't have to, and I do, because of you. I have trust issues. I have no trust in anybody I have ever come across and never will again. I walk the world in a full defense. I walk the world with the eyes in the back of my head because of you. I have had to seek therapy because of the trauma that you have caused me and such at a young age. I lost my own half. My sister meant everything to me. I made my sister miss my milestones. My sister has missed my high school and college graduation, the birth of her niece, holidays without the family, and birthday and etc. So do I think that she was willingly got into that car with you that night of April 25th, 2009 to party? Do I think she got into that car with you because you were willing? Hell no. Look at what you did to Carrie Harding. Yes, the truth came out about that too, in regards to partying. She wasn't even in the mood to party that night, according to her text message. She was... In conclusion to the point here, is that you stole Brittanee's life. So guess what? Now is the time you get your life stolen from you. For the rest of your life, I hope you get to sit in prison cell and endure all the pain, physically and mentally, that my sister endured during her last moments of her life. I hope you have nightmares that have continuously haunted you every night and still haunt you for the rest of your life. I hope it causes you so much pain to your mind and heart. I hope you know those feelings won't matter to no one else but you, because no one cares about you and never has. That's probably why you turned out into a monster, because you have been exposed in your childhood years to violence yourself. You are a peasant to the community, and now you deserve to be in the system's slave. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner.
In your honor, Dawn Placan, formerly Dawn Drexel, Brittanee's mother, would like to address the court.
Okay.
Hello, Your Honor. Today we know the truth, and today, Mr. Moody, you face the consequences for that. Today, my daughter, Brittanee, is here with me, with all of us, not just in spirit. Brittanee is present. I wear her picture and her ashes around my neck today and every day for the rest of my life, to celebrate her life, as does her father, John, Brittanee's grandmother, and the rest of our family and friends. And all of them that are here today, you can see, have their remembrance of her. That's all I have left. That's all we have left after what you did to her. Brittanee was a beautiful 17-year-old with her full life ahead of her. From the moment I gave birth to her, Brittanee was my life. She had a beautiful soul. She was our soccer star. She was in her junior year in high school getting ready for prom, was working, planning for college and her bright future. She was loved by everyone in our family, by her friends, classmates, and an entire community. She was a great big sister to Marissa and her brother Camden. Brittanee wanted to get married, she loved kids, and wanted to be a mom, a career woman, a wife. But you took that all away from her. What gave you the right to put your hands on my daughter? You are a disgrace to your parents, to your own children, to your family, and any friends you have left. You are a serial rapist and a child predator. You should be ashamed of your actions, especially having 3 daughters of your own. I am so glad my daughter was feisty. She fought back. She fought for her life. We know now that she's scratched the hell out of your head, face, and neck. You will forever carry the scars of what my daughter did to you, and I hope you are haunted by what you did to her. Today, no one wins. The criminal justice system has failed my daughter, as it continues to fail so many other victims. And frankly, Mr. Moody, it failed you, because you never should have been released from prison. You should have served the full 40-year sentence, but you walked after serving only 20 years and returned to your wicked ways, and my daughter paid for that with her own life. For 13 years, I have searched for Brittanee and suffered the loss of a child. For 13 years, others were blamed for your actions, and for that, I am so sorry for all they endured. My heart is broken, my life forever changed. So many lives destroyed by your selfish actions. Today, nobody wins. I hope you suffer in prison for the rest of your useless life. I have no regard for you, just like you had no regard for my daughter's life. Beyond the horrific things you did to my daughter, I am haunted by how many other people you have harmed over the last 18 years. I have spoken to some of your other victims, those lucky enough to have survived, but fortunate enough to be haunted by the memory of being only 8 years old and being brutally raped by you. No one wins. The loss of my daughter has ignited a fire in me and set me on a mission to strip away the rights and freedoms of people like you. I will fight along with other victims and their families to make sure that people like you never hurt a child again. My daughter's tragic and senseless murder has inspired me. Brittanee's life and memory are now the driving force behind the initiative to make changes in sex offender laws and to keep monsters like you where they belong, in cages, so they can never harm again. You have no power over me or my family. Forgiveness is not part of this narrative today. The second that you are sentenced, you become irrelevant to me and the world. Whatever anger or hate I may harbor towards you is forever outweighed by my love for Brittanee and by the love so many people have shown us along the way. I ask you, Judge Cothran, to sentence Raymond Moody to the fullest extent of the law, not a day less, to make sure his last breath is taken in the cage where he belongs, where he will never harm another beautiful girl like Brittanee again. No amount of time in prison would be sufficient for the lifetime you took away from Brittanee. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor, that concludes the state's presentation.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
May it please the court, Your Honor. On behalf of Mr. Moody, I concur with Brittanee's mother. There are no winners in this courtroom today. There are no words I can say on my behalf, Ms. Hannah's behalf, or Mr. Moody's behalf that's going to make it better for this family. There is not. I can tell you that Mr. Moody is here today accepting responsibility. He accepted responsibility back in May 5th of this year. As Your Honor knows, most cases of this nature would be years to come to a conclusion. It was Mr. Moody's desire that we do this as soon as possible to bring closure to that family. He regrets his actions. That doesn't do any good for that family, and I understand that. But what he did do in May of this year was hopefully bring some closure to this family when he walked the woods of Georgetown County with law enforcement. And hopefully today, as Ms. Drexel's mother said, this will bring some closure as well with this guilty plea. I believe Mr. Moody would like to briefly address the court, if the court would deem that appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
39 years, 9 days ago, I stood before the court. For the horrible things that I did. And I was sentenced to 40 years and 4 months. And I did 20 years and 8 months, and I thought that was enough, but it wasn't. I was a monster. I was a monster then, and I was a monster when I took Brittanee Drexel's life. And I don't have the words to express how horrible I feel, and I've felt ever since that day. I'm very, very sorry. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, counsel?
Other than Mr. Moody has expressed, and we have conveyed this to the solicitor, that he would be willing at some point in the future to allow any victim of his to speak to him directly. Today's not that day, but he is willing to do that at some point in the future, should anyone desire that, to express in a one-on-one setting.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Mr. Moody, we all products of the decisions we make in life. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people give up their long-term happiness for immediate pleasure. And you gave up a lot of people's long-term happiness for your immediate pleasure. And And the acts that you did were horrific. And I hate it for this family and all the years they've gone through, not knowing what happened to their loved one. But at least I commend you for ending this for them and at least closing this chapter in their life, where hopefully they will have that void will never be filled. They will always live with this pain for the rest of their life. For some senseless act that you did to satisfy some deprived immediate pleasure you have. And it's my job to sentence you appropriately for the crime of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree in indictment 22 GS 2200743. You're committed to the State Department of Correction for a term of 30 years. On kidnapping, indictment 2022 GS 2200742, sentence of the court is you committed to the State Department of Corrections for a term of 30 years. That is to run consecutive with the criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, and I find that kidnapping resulted in sexual misconduct, which results in, I know you're already on sexual registry, but it would require sexual registration. On the crime of murder, indictment 2022 GS 2200741, sentence of the court is you committed to the State Department of Correction for the term of your natural life. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
This court is temporarily adjourned to call her the solicitor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, let's go. You got to give this to her.
I'm gonna go get your TV. You run it. Let's just leave it up. Transfer on or feed it all back. Probably right out in that same area. It's right next to those blue things. Yes. Come on. If you don't reach out to us, you want them on their own.
Okay. Oh, I think we're good. I think, I don't know. I just saw the camera go by. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk.
Yep. Thanks.
I know Jason's set up.